Hi there and welcome to The History Teacher. This revision video covers Weimar and Nazi Germany from the GCSE Edexcel 9-1 course. Hopefully you'll also find it useful if you're studying any of the other exam boards or if, like me, you just love history. I'm 100% self-funded, so if you like my content, please consider buying me a coffee to keep me going. Hi there guys, today we're going to be looking at how the Weimar Republic was set up and the strengths and weaknesses of the Weimar Constitution. The Council of People's Representatives was set up in the immediate aftermath of the abdication of the Kaiser, but it was only ever supposed to be temporary. As soon as it was feasibly possible, the new Chancellor of the Reichstag, Friedrich Ebert, announced there would be elections held to choose a new National Assembly to represent the people. The new National Assembly would be responsible for drafting a constitution for the new republic. Those eligible to vote, which is everyone male or female over the age of 20, got to cast their first votes in the election held on the 19th of January 1919. The elections were a huge success. 83% of those eligible voted, and the Socialist Democratic Party won 40% of the vote. The Centre Party won 20%, and the rest was shared mostly between moderate, non-extreme parties. The first National Assembly met in February, but because there were still protests and unrest in Berlin, the Assembly was forced to meet in a small town called Weimar, about 300 kilometres from Berlin. As a consequence of this, the new government became known as the Weimar Republic. Over the next 6 months, the Assembly argued over the Constitution and what should be included. On the 31st of July 1919, the new Constitution was agreed. The Constitution set out how the government should operate and its structure. The new makeup of the German political system was to include a president, a chancellor, the parliament, and the electorate. The president was the head of state and they would be elected every 7 years. However, they were not to take part in everyday politics, but they would be responsible for the army and for choosing the chancellor. The chancellor, chosen by the president, was the head of the government. They were responsible for choosing the government ministers and for leading the Reichstag, the German parliament. They worked with their chosen ministers to ensure the country was running smoothly and made important decisions. The parliament itself was made up of two houses, the Reichstag and the Reichsrat. The Reichstag was the most powerful, making decisions about taxation and policy. They were elected by the people every 4 years. The Reichsrat was the representative of each of the German regions. They were also elected every 4 years. The electorate was unique in Europe because all men and women over the age of 20 had the vote. To put this in perspective, in Britain, women were only allowed to vote from 1919 if they were over the age of 30 and were property owners. One thing you might be asked about in the exam is about the strengths and weaknesses of the Weimar Constitution. So let's start by looking at the strengths. Firstly, the Constitution was completely democratic. Everyone over 20, regardless of background, had the vote. The seats in the Reichstag were chosen by proportional representation, which means that the number of seats any party gets in the Reichstag is proportional to the number of votes it gets in the election. Every party was given one seat for every 60,000 votes it got. Another strength was it was designed to provide balance between the powers. The president got to choose the chancellor rather than the party with the most votes, and they could also dismiss parliament if they believed they weren't doing a good job. The president was also in charge of the army, meaning that a minority government couldn't start a war without consulting the president. The Chancellor decided which laws should pass, but these had to be voted on in the Reichstag, and the Reichsrat could delay laws if they believed them to be unfair. Local government controlled local issues like policing and schools, and these local governments were also elected. However, there were some serious weaknesses to the Constitution. While proportional representation was a fair way of choosing the Reichstag, it also meant that it was very unlikely there would be a single party in control, which meant that it could be difficult to pass laws because the different parties would argue. This meant that the larger parties formed coalitions, agreements to support each other in parliament. However, these coalitions often fell apart, and there were 9 coalitions in the first 4 years of the Weimar Republic. Another problem, which links to the previous, is it was very hard to get urgent decisions made. So in a crisis, the government was very slow to react. However, there was a part of the Constitution called Article 48, which allowed the president to give control to the chancellor in an emergency. However, the Weimar Republic became reliant on this article throughout the 1920s, and this led to people thinking that the democracy didn't work and they'd be better off with a single, strong leader. Finally, because the votes were spread between dozens of parties, no one felt like the government actually represented them. This was made worse with the government using the army to put down riots in Berlin. The way the seats were allocated also meant that extreme parties such as communist and nationalist parties had a say in the Reichstag. These parties opposed the democracy and the Weimar Republic in particular, meaning they were trying to undermine the parliament all the time. Okay, that is everything for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave me a comment. I love to hear from you and I always reply as quickly as I can. I'm 100% self-funded, so please don't forget, if you like my content, I really appreciate it if you buy me a coffee to keep me going. The link is in the description. And that's everything for today, and I will see you next time.